I had two small children I was juggling. Next time I was working on a PhD, and Congress moved me. The third time I was working at Oakwood, I was working a full time job. I was dean of students. I was vice president for student services,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a full time job. I mean, more than a full time job. And I would come home on Saturday nights and stay up all Saturday night, all day Sunday, every so I could finish that degree. And then I was working on another master's degree after that, and I mean I was just working like 24/7, man. So that's why I don't stress students out because adult learners are different than undergraduate learners. Undergraduate learners, you got to push them and prod them and make them turn in all the assignments. But adult learners are there because they want to learn. You know, it's a different scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So why stress people out who are already working full-time jobs? Like for example, a lot of the professors, because I was the chair of the department there,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot of professors, all they did was just teach. And so they taught 3 classes a week, 4 classes a week. And so to them, that is their total world. That is their work. They forget that people have families, that people have jobs, that people have doctor's appointments, that people, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, yeah.
My daughter, my oldest daughter, who has her doctorate,
Mhm.
uh, told me a couple of months ago, Mama, why are you still going to school? Why don't you spend time with your family and, all the usual. I said, number one, all my kids are grown and I spend a great deal of time with my grandkids.
Right,
So this is for me. It's
right.
not for you all. And I think for 2 hours a day or when you all at sleep at home or wherever, because most of them don't even stay where I stay, you
Mhm.
know. So I'm not missing out on anything and you're not missing out on anything. So what I'm doing for me. So get over it.
I hear you. I hear you.
How are you, Dr. Blue?
Hello. How are you today, sir?
Hey
Hi.
Daniel.
Hi, how you doing, Fran? Doing good. I
Okay.
have I have a question. Do you have
Yes.
to be have a doctor's degree to be a professor at Oakwood?
No.
No.
It depends on what you're teaching. You definitely have to have a doctorate degree if you teach master's courses, but you don't have to have a doctorate degree to teach undergraduate courses.
Okay.
Although I think it's about 65% of the teachers at Oakwood all have doctorate degrees.
Okay.
Some departments are higher than other departments. Some, for example, don't need a doctorate degree. For example, in the music department, the highest degree in the fine arts is an MFA, a Master's in Fine Arts. That's the terminal degree. So you don't need a doctorate to do that. Um, so no, you don't have to have a doctorate. No.
Just curious.
Are you thinking about teaching?
Well, I like to teach, but I don't know. I mean, I'll be 56 when I finish this master's, and it's not I don't have faith. I know God has called me to do this, but um, you and I both know that the conference and our church depends on tithes and offerings, and look what happened this pandemic. Um, there's a lot of pastors that are out of work right now because of it. So, like I said, I like to teach, and I've had people tell me, why don't you become a professor? I said, I don't know if I can. I mean, I
Well,
don't.
I can tell you this. Right now, most of the pastors in the North American division are in their 50s and 60s. That's the majority. And many of them are slated to retire. Over half of them are at retirement age right now. And to be quite frank, the church is scrambling because they don't know where they're going to get pastors from in the next 2 to 3 years. Because as the older ones begin to retire, there aren't a whole lot of students in the undergraduate programs anymore. Because, to be quite frank, people look at that and say, well, look, I spent 4 years in school, I could be an engineer and make $100,000, or I could spend 4 years in school and be a pastor and be broke.
Yeah.
So they say, oh, well, I think I'll be an engineer.
Yeah.
And not only that, but we live in what I call a post-Christian America. In post-Christian America, uh, the ministry is not as highly valued as it used to be at other times. So it's just you know they, it's just not attractive to people. So I would say if that's what your career goal is, the main thing that you should do is at this point stay close to your conference president to demonstrate what you're doing. Um, uh, you're in Florida, right?
Yeah, I work. I'm actually a volunteer at for the Southeastern Conference. That's where I'm at with Dr. Mack.
Right. Yes.
I'm the director for the medical cadet ministry. I'm actually doing my motivating volunteer reflection on that.
Good.
Um, I'm actually I was working on it right now, but since I saw your email, I stopped because I wanted to listen to what you're going to talk about. Then I'll finish it. But
Okay.
I'm real close to them. I work with Pastor Prince Lewis. I think you know him also.
Yeah, I know Prince. Yeah.
He's the youth director, um, and Pastor I forget his name. He's the director of ministerial. He told me that just kind of hang in there and just show them what I can do, what I'm capable of, because he said the age doesn't matter. He said if God called you, He has a place for you. And I love to work for this conference.
Right.
Um, it's a predominant black conference, from Haiti, Jamaicans, African Americans, and we have very little Hispanics. But I want to stay in the American side, the English side.
Right.
I do. I've been in the Hispanic church most of my life, but now I'm getting into more involved in the American English preaching and stuff like that.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I'm hanging in here. It's hard, believe me. This semester has been really tough, but and I don't know if I mentioned this in the past, but I tried to get my bachelor's in Puerto Rico, and I had very serious problems over there, and I had to stop. So it's like every time I want to do this, the devil always puts something in my way. But I'm not giving up. I'm going forward. Um, you guys are awesome. You guys are understanding, as you said, which it means a lot to us, not just me. That you guys can work with us, and my goal is not just pass the class. Like I talked to Jonathan and Henry because I help them a lot because of the English. They don't speak too much English. And
Right.
I want to learn. I just because if I don't learn, then what am I doing? If I do get hired, I want to put all this to practice. And be a good pastor for the conference. So
Right. Right. Right.
yeah,
Well, you just keep doing what you're doing, man. And if you feel called, the only thing you can do is just press forward by faith
yes,
and be called. Um, that's all I can say. I mean, there's a professor at Oakwood right now. He teaches part time, Isaac Olatunji, and Olatunji has been in the ministry for like I don't know, 25 years at least, right? And or 20 years, but he just now got ordained
wow,
because he was working at Oakwood part time, and so the conference said, well, you're working at Oakwood, so if they hire you full time, we'll ordain you. And Oakwood said, well, you're working for the conference. If they ordain you, then we'll hire you. So
that's funny.
you go back and forth, but he didn't give up. He didn't give up, and so now he's pastoring two churches, and he's still teaching at Oakwood. So God makes a way, man.
That's good.
God makes a way.
Amen.
And the other thing too is I believe that as we move forward, there's going to be more and more opportunities for people to develop ministries. One thing that we've learned during the pandemic is that ministry is now no longer confined simply to the four walls of a building.
Yeah.
And if you can think outside of the four walls of the building, you can actually develop an international ministry that can reach further than what you can sitting inside of a location. When I was pastoring a church in New York, in Harlem, um, I had somebody to come to my church one time, a couple of tourists, because my church is sitting right in the heart of Harlem, and Harlem is a tourist location. They came in, and they were beaming and jumping up and down and said, it's you, it's really you, and all the rest of this stuff. And I came to find out, I may have mentioned this before, but I came to find out that they were from Italy.
Mm.
And they had been watching me in Italy.
Wow.
Yeah. And when they
And
came to New York, they said, "Oh, we got to go to Statue of Liberty. We got to go to the Empire State Building. We got to go see Dr. Blue."
is your church online on Saturdays?
Yeah, my church is online now.
Oh man,
Yeah.
I gotta look you up so I can watch you guys. I
Yeah,
was
it's
talking
called.
to Uba. He said he visited your church this Sabbath.
Yeah, he did. He did.
Yeah, he's good. He's running late. He told me he's
Yeah,
gonna be in a
it
little
was
bit
it
late.
was a surprise. I looked up and I said, "What you doing here, man?" He said, "Well, I thought I'd just come down and visit you." Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a
that's
nice
good.
surprise.
Yeah, I think of what you said a lot. You said you don't need money, you just need a vision. And I think
Yes.
about that, and I said, and then I have to really, sink that in myself because we put so many obstacles ourselves instead of just having faith and doing everything by faith. Most of the
Right.
great people in the Bible did everything by faith. So, it's a process. I'm still learning, but because the medical cadet ministry is something that can also help the kingdom and help the ministry in the church. And one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to use that as a program for the juveniles when they come out of juvie, to help them get back into the community because we train them in all the medical fields. They learn how to do disaster response. They know how to do search and rescue. Um, but we need money because the conference doesn't have money for that.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I think about what you say. I'm not going to worry about the money. I'm just going to keep with my vision. The staff that we have, they have the same goal, and I'll do my part and let God do His part.
Okay. Well, I want to come back to that because I have a suggestion for you, but I might as well give it to you now. There's a class on nonprofit on what is it? I forget what they call it. It's a new class. They just
You
introduced.
mentioned that last time, yes.
Yeah, I think
I like to take that even if it's just an extra class.
yeah, yeah. And that's what I was going to recommend. I was going to recommend that you take that anyway. I don't know if it's going to be offered next semester though. It might not be offered till next fall. But the class is definitely worth taking. The person who's teaching me right now is the associate director for community services for the North American division,
Wow.
and he really is an expert in nonprofit management. Also, in your conference, more than likely in your conference, you should check with your community service director. There are classes that they do to get you certified, and part of those classes talk about things like grant writing and those kinds of things. Because here's the other reality: if let's say you're waiting for the conference to get you picked up, and you really have ministry on your heart and on your mind, then writing grants may be a way for you to continue to do ministry, getting paid by somebody else to do the work of the Lord.
Yes.
I don't know if you are familiar with who James Black is. James Black was the youth director for the North American Division for many, many years.
Hmm.
He was an Oprah graduate. Um, but all the years when James was working for the church, he also was writing grants, writing grants, writing grants. And so through his grant writing, you know, he was able to start all different kinds of programs for youth that were now under his auspices that he directed. And so I was talking to James one day because we went to school together, and I said, "So James, man," he said, "So what you doing?" He said, "Man," he said, "this summer," he said, "I don't know what I'm doing. I'm so busy." He said, "I'm running a water skiing camp." A water skiing camp? I said, "How you running a water ski?" "Yeah, I'm running a water skiing camp for inner city kids." I
Yeah.
said, "How you manage that, man? Where you get the boats from?" He said, "I wrote a grant." He said, "So now I own all these speed boats, and I own the water skis, and I own the program, and I'm getting paid, and I got a staff, and I'm paying my staff to teach urban kids how to water ski."
Wow, that's great.
And so what I'm saying is that there are opportunities that are out there if you go out there and mine for them. But let's go ahead and get started. And whoever will join us today will join us, and if they don't, then that'll be fine. Those of us who are here are here. So let's bow our heads. Our Father in heaven, Lord, we want to thank you very much for granting us the opportunity to spend some time together on this evening. I want to ask and pray that as we take a look once again at the principles of church administration and organization, that you please enter into this conversation with us. Lord, we all know that the church needs help. Oftentimes we just don't know how to help. And even, Lord, when we learn all the things that we learn, we still fall short. We need the anointing of the Spirit of God upon our lives. We need to be cleansed from sin, and we need to be aligned with the Savior, so that the mission of the church will not be hindered through us, but that the church may grow and prosper as we cooperate with you in this work. We pray now, Lord, that as we spend a few moments in dialogue, that you enter into this conversation with us. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to just turn your attention just for a moment to a passage of Scripture that I think is apropos for what we talk about here. And the Scripture is found in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. And I'm reading from a different version. It's the Good Word version. Right? So it's a modern, a little bit more modern translation, but I like the way that it reads. It says, 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 1. You know, brothers and sisters, that our time with you was not wasted. As you know, we suffered rough and insulting treatment in Philippi, but our God gave us the courage to tell you his good news in spite of strong opposition. When we encourage you, we didn't use unethical schemes, corrupt practices, or deception. Rather, we were always spreading the good news. God trusts us to do this because we passed his test. We don't try to please people, but God, who tests our motives. As you know, we never use flattery or schemes to make money. God is our witness. We didn't seek praise from people, from you or from anyone else, although as apostles of Christ, we had the right to do this. Instead, we were gentle when we were with you, like a mother taking care of her children. I love this passage of Scripture because it talks about something I believe is absolutely critical to real leadership, and that is what I call authenticity. Authenticity. Now, authenticity is genuineness, it's validity, it's realness, it's veracity, it's keeping it real. Authenticity. The other day I was in New York and they had a massive raid in Chinatown. The FBI came there and seized 125,000 fake handbags. Because in New York, you could go on the street and you could buy a Louis Vuitton, you could buy Yves Saint Laurent, you could buy whatever you want to buy. You could buy a Coach bag for $20, right? And it's not a bad bag, you know, it sort of looks like the real thing, but it's not the real thing. It's a knockoff, right? It's a fake, it's a phony, right? They're not real, they're not authentic. And I say, in the end, there's really nothing like having the real thing. I say this to you tonight because I want you to understand this, that sometimes in the Church of the Living God, we have some pastors and some leaders who walk like pastors, who talk like pastors, who wear nice clothes like pastors, who drive big cars like pastors, chase plenty women like pastors, but they're not the real thing. They're fake and they're phony. They say one thing and they do something else, not because they're necessarily bad people, but because they lost something along the way. They lost their realness, they lost their genuineness, and they are no longer authentic. So today I tell you there's nothing that is like the real thing. That's what Paul is talking about in this particular text. He talks about authenticity. He talks about style versus substance, and caricature versus character, and self-serving versus servanthood. I want to take just a moment to talk about style versus substance, and we'll leave the rest for some other day and time. But style versus substance. He says here in verse 2, as you know, we suffered rough treatment and insulting treatment in Philippi, but God gave us the courage to tell you his good news. What I like here is that Paul didn't try to hide the situation. He assessed it properly. He didn't try to sidestep it or make believe that it wasn't there. Instead, he said that we saw it, it was rough, It was wrong and it was insulting. I read a book called Cool Pose by a couple of anthropologists named Majors and Billings. And in this book, Cool Pose, they talk about black manhood. They talk about how black men always are always so cool and always want to give the appearance of being strong, right? And on top of everything. And they began to posit the theory that the reason why they do this is because they are so fragile inside. On the outside, they look bigger and stronger than what they are. But in the inside, they're weak and they're fragile. And it is a false machismo. It is looking like a man, but not really being a man. And they call this thing cool pose. So, black men, and it's true for Hispanic men too, we got the swagger, we got the dip, the dap, the hip, the hop, we know how to move and groove, right? And to never show your emotions. Never let them see you sweat. The great African-American poet Paul Laurence Dunbar wrote these words. And it sort of describes many who are in the ministry. He said, "We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. The debt we pay to human guile, with torn and bleeding hearts we smile. And with a mouth of myriad subtleties, why should the world be otherwise? In counting all our tears and sighs. No, let them only see us smile when we wear the mask." So I've discovered that in the church, and if you're thinking about doing church work, you should know there's a lot of hurting preachers, there's a lot of hurting administrators, a lot of conference workers who look like everything is all right when it's not. They bought a suit so they can look good, but they can't pay their bills. They're driving a nice car that's about to be repossessed. The church is in turmoil, but as workers, they come to workers' meeting looking like everything is all right. You ask them how things are doing, they say, well, the Lord is blessing. But inside, they feel otherwise. They see others who get bigger churches and they feel left behind. Others who get offices and they feel left out. They see others who get employed, Daniel, who have less talent. And they get discouraged. They see that their children are acting up and their wife is ready to leave and their blood pressure is going up and their heart is palpitating and their blood sugar is out of control and they can't manage their weight because they can't manage their life. They're being pulled and tugged and pushed and cajoled, right? Because they're all trying to fake it until they make it. Cool pose. But being authentic relieves you of the pressure of having to live up to somebody else's expectations. Somebody said, well, I don't want to be authentic because being authentic means I got to spill my guts to everybody, tell everybody what's going on in my life. We have a saying, keep your business at home, don't put your business in the street, right? We all do that, right? Don't put your business in the street. But the fact of the matter is that when we are open and vulnerable, then we also allow ourselves to be real and accessible. Paul here doesn't pull punches. He says, we suffered rough treatment. It was rough and it was tough. But I like what he says here. It was rough, it was insulting. He says, but God gave us courage. God gave us courage. You see, when you're trying to fake it, that's style. But when you make it, that's substance. Style says, I'll fake it, but substance says, it was rough, but our God was able. Style says, let me gloss it over. But substance says, it was dirty, but God was able to clean it up. Style says, put lipstick on the pig. But substance says, God takes the lipstick off the pig because God doesn't work with old things. God wants to do a new thing. He wants to replace the old with the new, and the fear with courage, and the hurt with the healing, and the loneliness with the comfort. We don't have to fake it. We can be real. I conclude with this, and I can go on and on. Let me just conclude this. One
47.
day, and here's what leadership, talking about leadership. I was sitting in a meeting one day, and all of us have been on board meetings or committee meetings, and an important vote was coming up, and it was time to vote. And I was getting ready to vote somebody else's conscience rather than my own. You know how it is when you sit in the room and people have expectations of you, and people want you to move the vote a certain way, and they solicit your vote. I'm sitting there and I'm getting ready to vote somebody else's conscience. And then it occurred to me that God didn't send me there to vote somebody else's conscience. God sent me there to vote my conscience and to do His will. And on that day, I made a determination. The determination I made is that I didn't want to be a weatherman. I wanted to be a rain cloud. Now, do you know the difference between a weatherman and a rain cloud? The difference is this. The weatherman can only report the weather, but the rain cloud makes the weather. When people see the weatherman, they're happy to see the weatherman. Oh, weatherman, tell me what the weather's going to be like today. Everybody wants to hear the weatherman, but nobody wants to see the rain cloud. When the rain cloud shows up, people get mad at the rain cloud. Go away, Mr. Rain Cloud, come again another day. And so it is possible for the rain cloud to turn himself into himself, shrink away, and think to himself, maybe I should go someplace else. Maybe I should do something else. Maybe I should shrink myself so Mr. Sunshine can come out, because they like sunshine, but they don't like rain cloud. Maybe I should change myself into a cirrus cloud, because they like wispy, pretty cirrus clouds, but they don't like rain clouds. Maybe I should just do something else and pass over and move on rather than doing what I am called to do. But you know something about a rain cloud? A rain cloud is a rain cloud is a rain cloud is a rain cloud. If a rain cloud stays up there long enough, a rain cloud can't come back. Sooner or later, what's on the inside is going to come out. First it's going to be one drop, then it's going to be two drops and three drops. And the rain cloud will try to hold in all he wants to. But sooner or later, the rain cloud has to be a rain cloud and do what the rain cloud was called to do. I'm telling you today, in your leadership, don't be the weatherman that reports the news. Be the rain cloud. Be the one that makes the weather, not reports the weather. You don't have to be somebody else to be effective in ministry. Just be who God called you to be. Be authentic in what you do. Allow God to use you. Out of the abundance of your heart, allow your mouth to speak. Know that the same God that sanctified the person sitting beside you is the same God that sanctified you. Know that God didn't give that person any more than what He gave you. He may have given you different gifts, but your gifts are just as valuable in the body of believers as somebody else's. And so don't shrink from the challenge. Don't try to fake it till you make it. Don't try to be somebody else. Just be what God called you to be, and God will bless you.
Amen.
He'll bless you. So, tonight, I want to talk to you for a little bit. First of all, about volunteers, and then a little bit about situational leadership. Right? I think I'm going to start with situational leadership first, because I think it may roll a little bit more closely to what we were just talking. Let me share my screen. Take a moment, if you would, just to describe this. What is it? What is this?
Donut with sprinkles.
A donut with sprinkles. Describe it.
Round hole in the middle, so it's not circle, but it has a hole in the center. It's different color thing is on top of it, multicolored. It also has pink icing on it. It's kind of a goldy brown in color.
Yes. All right. That's a good description. Right? I'm glad that you said it has a hole in it. You know, some people, when they see the donut, right, they spend all the time looking at the hole. And they're mad because there's a hole in the middle. They say, I got cheated. Because where's the rest of my donut? Right? But E.E. Cleveland said that some people get upset because of the hole in the donut. He said, forget the hole, eat the donut. In other words, as leaders, let's not look at what we don't have. Let's look at what we do have. Let's not complain about what is not. Rather, let us celebrate what is. There's enough that is there for us to enjoy rather than us looking at the deficits. Let's enjoy the blessings. Right? Celebrate what you do have. Stop looking at your deficiencies and start looking at God's provision. E.E. Cleveland said this, and I love this. He says, I have seen God do so much with so little for so long, and I now believe that he can do anything with nothing, meaning me. He made us memorize that. I memorized that 40-something years ago, and I still have it with me. And I make my churches say it from time to time. I have seen God do so much with so little for so long. I now believe that he can do anything with nothing, meaning me.
Okay. Dr. Blue Joy is waiting to get in.
Okay. Let's see. I gotta shrink the screen down. I can find it. Thank you for that. This isn't it. When I'm in presentation mode, it doesn't pop up on the screen, so I don't see it. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you tonight, just for a few moments, about the 4 frames of leadership. This was a presentation that I did about a year or so ago for the faculty, administration, at Oakwood, home my wife, Dr. Elfrida Blue. So some of the references in here make reference to education, but the concepts are transferable to any setting, any situation. As a matter of fact, the concepts here have been used in education, have been used in medicine, have been used in business and industry. And so it's an interesting way of taking a look at leadership. We all know that in leadership, one thing leads to another. For every action is an equal and opposite reaction, right? We call that direct causation, right? One thing happens and it causes something else to happen. But in reality, things are not usually that simple. In reality, instead of singular causation, sometimes there's multiple causations. Multiple causations are several things happening at the same time that have impact upon the event. So, for example, let's say I'm having a heart attack, for example. Okay, it will affect my breathing. It may affect my consciousness, right? It certainly will affect my respiratory system, right? And my circulatory system. But that may be multiple causations. But in systemic causations, which is the next level, you have many things that are happening all at the same time. And these many things are infecting and infecting the entire system at once. Right? So I just want to say one word about this systemic causation. When you're taking a look at your church, I'm trying to find an example for you. Let me see if I can find one. All right, you come to a board meeting and you're trying to get something passed, and somebody says, we don't have the money for that right now. And you're looking at the report and saying, there's money right here. I mean, all we have to do is transfer this money from here to here, and we have it. No, we don't have the money. And you're saying, what in the world is going on? Then you find out later on that the reason why the person said they didn't have the money was because 10 years ago, when they were trying to do a particular program, somebody took their money and transferred it to that particular account. And they promised to give it back, but they never got it back. So now they're sitting there and they're going to block something that somebody else wants to do because of what happened 10 years ago. Now you want to throw another layer on top of that. I'll give you another real situation. On top of that one, I'm sitting on the board one day, and there is an ex-husband and an ex-wife, and she's mad with him about what he did or didn't do with or for the kids. So now it doesn't even become about what's happening inside that meeting at the moment. It's about something that's happening outside the meeting that has been brought into the meeting, and now they're at each other's throats. And now because they're at each other's throats, you have people in the meeting who are taking sides with them. So ultimately, the whole meeting breaks down because often when you're tackling a problem, it's not simple cause and effect. And sometimes it's not even as straight as a number of series of causations. Sometimes they all get mingled and mixed up there together. So, in taking a look at these multiple systemic causations, we want to take a look at, as we were saying before, some of the major changes in education is demographic, market size, competitiveness, student expectations. So if we were to say, we're going to apply this to church, we would say demographics. Sure, it's the same principle. Market size, competitiveness. You've got churches around you who are trying to get people. Instead of student expectations, what are the expectations of the members? You have operational efficiency challenges and just a drop in religiosity in the United States. And all of these changes require situational leadership. Now, this statement was written for colleges and universities, but it applies. Right? The role of a mid and senior level leaders in making change happen is critical to translate the vision of the change from a C-suite to the ground troops. Right? Help direct reports, navigate emotions of change and transition, and influence change agents to generate alignment and commitment for the change effort to be successful. What he is saying here is that the role of senior and level leaders in making change is critical to translate the vision. Now, I want to be plain to you, right? If you are a departmental leader, then you are mid-level. Even if you are a pastor, you are mid-level. Because pastors don't have total autonomy. In the Adventist church, the pastors, they may be the one who is overseeing the operation, but they answer to the board. They answer to the congregation. They surely answer to the conference. So if you're going to make changes happen, you got to be able to navigate all of these competing and conflicting elements. Organizations these days, they have to be nimble and responsive, and leaders must be adaptable and proactive. Changing dynamics require situational leadership. This is a four-frame model of situational leadership that was developed by Bowl and Dealman, right? Bowl and Dealman identified four distinctive frames from which people view their world. They are the four frames of the structural, the human resources, the political, and the symbolic. Four frames. We'll describe for you what these frames are and what a frame is. But a frame, generally speaking, is a window into the world. How you see the world. Let's call that your frame. And depending upon how you frame a picture, you will get a different picture every time. So these frames are paradigms and models for how to see your situation. And as you look at them through the different frames, you get different perspectives. So the frame defines the parameter. It becomes the window through which we see objects and shapes. So, if you see the hands here, around them are dark clouds, and all of a sudden there's a break in the cloud. If that was the picture just by itself within that frame, you would think it's a beautiful sunny day. Right? If you remove the hands, you remove the frame, you get a totally different perspective. In a cognitive sense, right, a frame is a mental map, a behavioral disposition. It allows you to respond to different people in different situations and events. It's a window and a lens that allows you greater clarity. Here's an example. Inside are two pictures. They're the exact same picture, but in different frames. And you will notice, based upon the frame, the picture looks totally different. When it's in the darker frame, the sky looks bluer. Right? The church stands out more. The trees are there. We can see the trees. In the lighter frame, right, the picture sort of fades, doesn't it, right? The color of the frame sort of picks up more of the whites. And so the picture sort of bleeds out. You know? So just changing the frame changes the picture, what you see. So oftentimes in counseling and psychology, we use the terms we talk about reframing. So if a frame is your window on the world and you want to see things differently, then what you need to do is change the frame, right? Analyze events from multiple perspectives to explore what's really going on, right? Allow us to consider different opinions, and it enhances effectiveness of strategy and action, and effective leadership associated with the use of multiple frames and principle flexibility. In other words, when you start a new frame, it just gives you a different way of looking at it. So the four-frame model, they talk about ways of seeing leadership, and you can switch from frame to frame to get different outcomes. So, are you saying I can use frames to change myself in my department? That's exactly what I'm saying. The truly effective leader will use multiple tools and skills, right, to use each of them and know the wisdom to match the frame to the situation. So each situation that you're in may require something different of you. If you look at these frames are nothing more than tools that you have in your toolbox. Last time we were talking, I mentioned to you about the story when I was in the church and they were complaining about the Hispanic church and wanted to kick them out. And so I held up the quarter and I slammed it on the table and I slid it to whatever, said call the conference, right? And it shocked them to no end. Right? Do you think that I was really just going off the deep end with no purpose in that? Of course not. I was doing it for a reason. It was a tool that I was using. It was a frame that I was setting for them. So let's look at these frames. We'll look at the first frame. The first frame is called a structural frame. Its origins are in sociology and management science. Right? And the structural frame, we look at goals and specialized roles and formal relationships. Oftentimes, when you sit down the board, there are some people who can only see the church through the structural frame. Well, Pastor, who is the first elder? Who is the second elder? Who is the third elder? Who does this? Give me the org chart. That is the structural frame through which we see organizations. In the structural frame, the leader tends to be the sovereign, the one who is the king. It tends to be top-down management with clear lines of authority and clearly defined rules. The leader, Donald Trump, is commander-in-chief. In the structural frame, you know who you report to. and you know what you're supposed to do. All right, you know your role, and you stay in your role. Structures fit organizations, environment, and technology, and responsibility, rules, policies, and procedures, and the organization is hierarchical and structural frame. When problems arise, the structure does not fit the situation. So the structure is not going to change. It's going to be there. Like, I hear a lot of people complain all the time, like, why can't we get rid of the conference? Well, you can figure that the conference there, the conference not going anywhere. It's in that frame, it's not moving. Right? What's the second frame? Second frame is the human resources frame. Organizations act like extended family. Right? Individuals with needs, feelings, prejudices, and skills and limitations, it recognizes that. Its origins are in psychology, with the capacity to learn, ideology, capacity to defend old attitudes, beliefs, and systems, right? This human resources frame is the touchy-feely frame. In the touchy-feely frame, we believe that somehow we can take care of people's needs, that they will be able to perform maximally. So, what we do in the human resources frame is we try to align the resources with the human needs, understanding when needs are met, it releases. You heard the old saying that a happy cow produces more milk. That's the human resources. All right. The person in charge of the human resources frame could be seen as a steward. And the structural is the sovereign. In the human resources, the person is a steward. It's relational management. They seek to empower and train workers to maximize potential. And the leader is a facilitator in chief. Challenges in the human resources frame is to tailor the organization to people, to find a way for individuals to get the job done while feeling good about what they're doing. The third frame is the political frame. We know about this one, right? Its origins are in political science. This is when people are not politicking but politricking. People bargain and negotiate, they use coercion and compromise, they get coalitions and little special interest groups to try to maneuver for power. That's called the political frame. We see a lot of that happening in the church, especially around election time. And the political frame, right, it's dog eat dog, winner take all, right? And the leader is the politician in chief. Problems arise when power is concentrated in the wrong places or is too broadly distributed, right? So in this political frame, if all the power rests with Donald Trump, you have a problem, right? Or if power is sort of dissipated, when you have so many factions fighting, you never get anything done. And then the fourth frame, I'm going to conclude with this because I could talk about this all day. I want to get to talk about volunteers. This is a symbolic frame. This symbolic frame operates in the area of symbols and motivation. Its origins are in social and cultural anthropology. And organizations in this frame are seen as tribes, theaters, or carnivals. It deals in the area of rituals and ceremonies and stories and heroes and myths. And in this frame, the organization is a theater, and the rest of us are actors who play a role while the audiences perform and form impressions of what we do. In this frame, the leader is the inspirer in chief. He often uses frames and metaphors to inspire people. Problems arise in this frame when actors play their parts badly, and when symbols lose their meaning, and when ceremonies and rituals lose their potency. So I'm going to conclude with this slide because all this is online for you, and we can come back and talk about this at some other time. But in the structural frame, right? In the structural frame, the organization is seen as a factory. The central concepts are rules and goals and policies. The image of the leader is social architecture, and we see him as a sovereign, right? The basic leadership challenge is to attune the structure to task and technology and the organizational ethic is excellence, and the leadership contribution is authorship. In the human resources frame, right, it's seen as a family, right, where needs are taken care of. We want to empower people and align the organization to what the human needs. It's an organization that cares for people and loves people, right? In the political frame, it's a jungle. It's dog eat dog. It's power and conflict and competition, right? The image of the leadership is advocacy, and we want to develop an agenda and get a power base, and the organizational ethic is justice and power. And the symbolic, right? The organization is seen as a carnival or temple or theater, right? We look for things like culture and meaning and metaphor and ritual and ceremonies and stories. The image of the leader is inspiration, and we want to create faith and beauty and meaning. The organizational ethic is faith, and the leadership contribution is significance. Now, question for you. If you were stopping and trying to analyze the church, where does the church fit in this four-frame model?
I would say mine falls in the political.
Political.
Mm-hmm.
I would say symbolic.
Wow. Why do you say political, and why do you say symbolic? Why do you say political?
I'd say political because there's a little bit of power conflict between certain families with the pastor. You know, not going into too much detail there.
Okay.
So that's
So in your situation, you got the jungle.
yeah.
Rumble in the jungle. Okay. All right.
The reason I said symbolic is we use a lot of culture, meaning, metaphors, ceremonies, stories out of the Bible. We try to inspire people to want to serve God, and we try to create faith in people by these stories and by the actions, and we want them to be a part of the family too, which is part of the human resource part, I guess, by making them feel welcome in the body. So it's almost like you come in and we're entertaining, but we got a purpose behind what we're doing. Listen, I don't know.
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in?
I think we're a human resource model.
Why do you say that?
We're very small, and a lot of the time spent by the pastors encouraging members to be active and take a little bit of responsibility, and there's very little dictating. Everything has to be consensus, and when if you don't reach the consensus that he wants, it's a lot of nudging and but in a very caring way until we get there. And align organizational and human needs. Like our needs are not like really aligned, so that's like a constant struggle, you know, with who we have at church versus what we need, and trying to bridge that. Yeah.
All right. I think it's kind of interesting that based upon the three of you, we have three different primary frames that are at work: the human resources, the political, and the symbolic. In three different situations, three different frames. If you take a look across this, you'll also notice that at any given time, all four of these frames can be operational in one context. Right? Although one will tend to be dominant at any given time, all four can be operational at the same time. So, we want to, let's say, in the human resources frame, take a look at church, right? We want to empower people to get them involved, okay? But at some point, when we're trying to get them involved, we got roles and goals and responsibilities. We want to put some structure to it. And then the political frame, right? We got the rumble and the jungle. And sometimes that rumble in the jungle is the direct result because people haven't spent enough time in the symbolic frame, trying to find culture and meaning and inspiration and faith. So instead, they're fighting about the mundane things, where the symbolic model, they could be elevated above and beyond that. Sometimes, however, we see in the symbolic model, right, that people can be so so heavenly minded they're no earthly good, right? So people, I mean, when I first came to the church I'm in now, don't tell them this, but it would drive me crazy. It would drive me crazy. You know, when I got there, I had 2 hairs, and now you see I don't have any hair left. They took the last 2 out. It would drive me crazy. You know why they would drive me crazy? They would drive me crazy because all they want to do is pray all the time. They come to prayer meeting. They want to pray. After church on Sabbath, they want to pray. At least once a month after church, they would have 3 hours of fasting and prayer after church. Nobody would could go anywhere but sit there in the sanctuary for 3 hours of prayer after church. Now, I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to prayer. But I realized very soon that the only ministry they had was prayer. The only thing they were doing was praying. They was praying all the time. They weren't doing anything else but praying. Somehow they had gotten stuck in the symbolic model and had forgot that somewhere along the line it requires structure for empowerment and advocacy to move an organization forward. So you may find at any given time one is dominant, but you will notice that you will ultimately need all 4 of these at any given time. And that's why there is situational leadership. And that's why they create this 4-frame model. Sometimes you will have to be the sovereign. You'll have to be the king or the queen. In the model of the sovereign, right, in their structural model, then the queen declares, the queen calibrates, the queen has specialization, stratification, right, and the queen makes things happen out of that frame. Sometimes, when in leadership, you got to put that hat on and be king or queen, right? Sometimes you have to be the steward. Mm-hmm. And then in the steward, you may have to fertilize and germinate. That's what Joy is talking about in her context, right? Right? You have to make some accommodations and fertilize some things and nurture things to grow. Sometimes in your leadership, right, you got to be sharp. Sometimes it is the rumble in the jungle, and sometimes it's winner take all. And when you're in a dog fight, sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves and fight. Sometimes it just happens that way, right? When people want to withhold the tithe in a particular situation, and I told them, no, we're not withholding the tithe, and they got mad with me, I said, well, let's go at it then, right? We went at it because I was not about to allow them to win that argument. Sometimes it has to be confrontation, or protest, or negotiation. And always, this works best in church because people are there because they want to be inspired. They don't want to fight. They want to be inspired. The inspiration, imagination, and application. So it helps us at different times to be able to switch hats. So the effective leader in the structural model is the analyst and the architect. In the human resources model, he or she is the catalyst and the servant. In the political, the advocate, the negotiator, and in the symbolic, the prophet and the poet. Can you see how each one of these things could be used from time to time in your leadership style? So part of this is being able to analyze where you are, analyze your situation, and say at any given time, it calls for this leadership at this time. Now, I'll give you another example from the world of medicine, and then I'll just end with this.
Dr. Blue, Uba's trying to get in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just end with this little illustration here. You know, there are times when we are sick. Right? Anybody here been sick? I've been sick. We've all been sick. Sometimes you're sick and you can take an aspirin. Doctor says, call me in the morning. Take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning, right? Or take these pills and see me next week if you're not feeling any better. There are other times, however, when we have an emergency situation. You can't breathe. You're having a heart attack. You're having a stroke, right? There's a major pain. You have a rupture. You have a major infection. You need to go to the hospital. When you go to the hospital, that is not the time for the doctor to go into the human resources frame of leadership. The doctor's not there to say, well, you know, I just want to support you now and empower you to feel better, right? Right? That's not the time when the doctor needs to go into the political frame, right? Where they want to negotiate with you and advocate with you. If you're having a heart attack, that's no time for negotiation, right? That's not the time for him to sit there and read poetry to you, right? That's not the time. When you're in a major crisis, you need an effective leader who's going to be the sovereign, the one who comes in, takes a look at the staff and says, prepare the OR right now. I need an EKG here. Bring the crash cart. I want 500,000 units of epinephrine to go inside him right now. Pump his heart up or whatever else. You need somebody who's going to take charge and do what they have to do at that very moment to stabilize the patient so the patient has another day to fight. Right? After you get out the hospital, now it's time to talk about how can we change your diet? What kind of support do you have around you to help you with your daily activities? You know? So now it's a different kind of leadership that's required. So what I want you to think about in terms of your own leadership is that you got to switch from hat to hat, from time to time. When the church is not moving at all, the church is stuck in neutral. That's not the time to jump up with the structural frame and say, I'm the pastor, because I'm the pastor, I say, this is the way it's going to go. When the church is stuck and it's not moving, right, then I look into 2 areas. How can I empower and support people to be more effective? And then how can I inspire people with a larger vision? Sometimes you have to be in that symbolic frame to cast the larger vision and the bigger picture and to tell people how great and wonderful this thing is, right? So switch the hats from time to time to fit the situation, and I think that will probably assist you a little bit in your leadership. Any questions? All right. Okay, well, let me get out of here then. I talk too much. Now my computer wants to freeze on me. Let me, I'm going to run through the thing on volunteers real quick, and I want to spend some time so we can talk about your situations, okay? I think I always plan too much stuff for doing 1 2-hour session, but you know, that's just me. Can't help it. Forgive me. I have sinned. Amen. My wife was always on me. She said, son, why you feel like you gotta tell everybody everything at one time? That's why I have a wife, you know. That's why you need somebody in your life to always correct you. And she corrects me. I do that quite well. She got an A in that class. So say amen. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about volunteers just for a bit, okay? Volunteer, right? When something needs doing, no one is compelled to do it, right? Yet someone steps forward to take it on. Who would expect it? Volunteerism centers on the fundamental counters, the fundamental selfishness that rules so many decisions. It burdens the one who has the opportunity not to be burdened, but chooses to do it anyway. It doesn't make sense, humanly speaking, to be a volunteer. But people step forward and they do it, right? From the beginning of the church, people gave their time. Right? That's what people do in church. What makes the church different from the business? In the business, you can tell folk what to do. In church, you can't tell folk what to do. They are volunteering their time. They step forward because they feel a passion. So in order to motivate your volunteers, you gotta use gratitude rather than guilt. A lot of times, I've walked in churches and you have you've been sitting in the pew and the pastor said, well, you don't do this, then God's not going to be pleased with you. But who wants to respond because God's not going to be pleased with you, right? I would prefer if someone said to me, we are so thankful for what you have been able to contribute. And I know that God is pleased with you. I would prefer the gratitude than the guilt, right? Guilt is a bad motivator. It can get things done for a short period of time, but it doesn't work over the long haul. So, tapping people's existing dissatisfactions. When people are totally dissatisfied, right, it's hard to get them moving, right? But if a person is somewhat dissatisfied, then you can tap into that dissatisfaction and say, hey, listen, why don't we walk together to get this thing done? When I was a younger person, I wasn't going to church at all. It couldn't get me to go to church. I hate church. I hate church. I hate church people. I hate church so bad. I used to walk on the other side of the street just so I wouldn't be on the same side of the street as a church. That's how bad I hate church. I remember there was a man by the name of John Germany who came to me one day. He said, look, man, the church is so bad. Why don't you do something to get in there and change it? He used my dissatisfaction to engage me. Well, I wouldn't go to church. I still wouldn't go to church. But he had a big brother, big sister program. He said, no, man, I don't go to church. Why would I ask you to go to church when you hate church? Instead, man, listen, you into the black thing. I got some black kids over here. When you come by once a week and sort of help these black kids, take a mentor one of these black boys for me, right? And he backdoored me in by volunteerism, okay? So sometimes you can tap into people's dissatisfactions, right? One way to move your volunteers is that you got to understand the volunteers give more than they put in, right? They're putting much more in than you can ever pay them, right? So just celebrate them. You also need to learn from your volunteers. One of the biggest mistakes that churches make and pastors make all the time is they think just because somebody is giving something for free that they don't know anything, right? They think folks don't know. People know a lot. So learn from them. They can teach you something. I was in a particular situation, in a particular church. I was trying to do some strategic planning, and I was sitting there in the church, and this lady came to me. She said, I do this for a living. I said, you do this for a living? She said, I do this all day long, Pastor. I said, okay, you're the person in charge, right? Learn from them. You need to clarify the roles and the expectations. What frame is that? I'm putting on my frame. What frame is that? I'm going to clarify the roles and the expectations.
Organizational.
Organization. The political frame. Right. It's organization. It's a political frame. The job descriptions, the structure, the policies and the protocols. Right? Have you ever tried to volunteer for somebody and you go there and they can't tell you what they want you to do? I see you shaking your head, friend. See that out?
Yes. It was frustrating because you didn't know what to do and you wanted to help. And you almost felt like, in my case, I felt like just taking over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it helps, right? If people are coming, give them the job description, delineate the reporting structures, clarify the roles, expectations, and create an infrastructure for success. What personnel and equipment and supplies does it take for the volunteer to complete their task, right? Build small goals along the way toward the main goal so the volunteer can experience the joy of success. Give feedback on the roadblocks to success and acknowledge their accomplishments. Play you this little video. Play a portion of this video. one of the most successful volunteer programs of all time was started back in the 1960s. And it's called the Peace Corps. Trying to blow it up for you.
Peace Corps is a life-defining leadership experience. Volunteers live, learn, and work with a community overseas for 27 months, providing grassroots assistance in 6 program areas.
I am one of more than 200,000 returned Peace Corps volunteers who has answered the call to serve. And it's an incredible feeling to be part of this vibrant program.
Since 1961, Peace Corps volunteers have improved the lives of millions of people around the world. Their work represents a legacy of public service that has remained true to Peace Corps' mission spanning over 5 decades.
You see it has a mission there? So it's talking about mission, right? So know this mission, right? This mission is
Can you? I think you might need to share your screen to the to YouTube. We're still seeing the PowerPoint.
oh, we're still seeing the PowerPoint. Okay, let me thank you for that. Now are you seeing it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Here I am thinking I'm doing a good thing.
Peace Corps promotes world peace and friendship by providing trained volunteers to countries that request assistance, promoting a better understanding of Americans, and sharing a global perspective here at home. Peace Corps places volunteers with the community where their skills and experience are most needed.
Peace Corps places volunteers in communities where their skills are most needed. You deal with volunteers, try to give them something meaningful to do that fits their skill set. Just don't drop them anywhere. Right?
Host country requests for assistance.
Peace Corps service begins with training in the country in which volunteers earn.
Peace Corps begins with training. Right? Train your volunteers.
Volunteers study together and receive intensive training in the local language. They also receive technical training related to their job assignments and learn more about the country through cross-cultural training.
The training here was pretty intense.
Notice, right, that the volunteers receive training in the language and training in the culture. In other words, the volunteers are learning the context in which they operate. So they are learning the demographics of their community. Therefore, they are able to identify the needs of their community so that they are able to address those needs effectively as volunteers.
Language classes 4 or 5 hours a day, and we were living in villages during the training, so the training never really ends.
The training never really ends.
Peace Corps training did help a lot. And then being here at school, watching other teachers teach, and have those teachers watch me teach. And
Notice, right? Watching other teachers teach and watching teachers teach me teach. In other words, there is cross-training that goes along, and people are supporting each other along the way. And when I see this, I think automatically of the human resources training, right? Where there is training, there's support, there's encouragement, there's empowerment, so that people can utilize and maximize their skills.
pointers, what to do, what not to do, those things helped. Shafiq is it's also helping our staff teachers with the computer, because most of us do not know how to use a computer. Pre-service training, or before you get to the site, it's about a 3-month-long process, and you go through a lot of language training in the local language. You also go through safety and security training, medical training, things to look out for on both of those fronts.
With training, they teach you a lot of things, but nothing is like when you go out there and you first get in your community. That's really when they say the rubber meets the road.
Volunteers are assigned to work in the community in one of 6 program areas: education, youth and community development, health, agriculture, environment, and business, and information and communications technology.
I'm going to end it here, but I also want you to notice that the volunteers are assigned into various sectors based upon their skill set. So when you're thinking about volunteers, think about the various roles and responsibilities. Like, I have a feeding program at my church. This is an example, right? I tell you that we feed about 450 families per week. And to have a feeding program is great. You know, we give them groceries for an entire week. Enough groceries to feed a family for an entire week. That's what we do. In order to make that program run successfully, however, we have trucks that come in. When the trucks that come in, I have to have people who just unload trucks. I have to have people who just go in trucks to pick up things. I have to have people who bag the food. I have to have people who are responsible for setting it out in distribution. I have to have people who are responsible for registration. Now I'm adding other components to it, where we'll be doing medical screening at the same time on the same site, and adding a prayer ministry at the same time on the same site. So I'm not going to assign one of my medical personnel to sit there and register people. I need them to be doing the health checks, doing wellness checks on people. So if you take a look at the various sectors, you can divide the volunteers into various sectors, and you maximize the volunteer labor and effort. Right? I'm going to share with you just one more thing on motivating volunteers, and I'm going to pull it from, find it. It's in there somewhere, but now I need a volunteer. Constantly work my technology for me. Volunteers? Okay, come on, get down here. All right. I'm just going to end this right here. Manipulation doesn't work. Motivate them. There's intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic comes from the inside. Extrinsic is when you try to do it from the outside. There are certain needs that you can work with your people on: acceptance, curiosity, family, honor, idealism, independence, order, right? And when you take a look at some of these things, I put a little video here of President Obama. It's about a couple of minutes long, where he's trying to encourage people to join the Peace Corps. He pushes all of those buttons in his attempt. In this particular video, he is operating out of the symbolic frame as the inspirer in chief. Okay. So I'll let you look at that on your own. We only have about 40 minutes left, and I do want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in your context. Some of you said that you might bring some challenges here that perhaps we could discuss. So, do you have any particular challenges in your context that you would like to discuss? Anything you take a look at and say, well, look, if I were to throw this out to the class, what would class say? What kind of insights would the class bring to this particular situation with which I'm dealing at the moment?
I can share a challenge. With where I live, there's a lot of the population is lower income, and not everyone has reliable internet or computer access. And mostly that's our Alaska Native church members, who of course are the ones we're hoping to reach, because this is their community. So being with COVID, when we had to shut down our church, we did try virtual church, and people would call in and use the phone line, but that's kind of limited engagement. People weren't really using video. Not everyone was comfortable using the technology or had access. So we've gone back to church now, I think since July, but we're basically only doing church services, so we're not doing, and we all wear masks of course, but we're not doing like our Friday night prayer meeting / Bible study, not having kids Sabbath school or any kind of kids programming, Pathfinders or anything. It's basically just church service. So of course a lot of our kids haven't been coming. I don't know, that could be because of COVID, or it could be because we've slimmed down the services so much. So I'm not sure how we can balance, COVID may be here permanently, we don't know, or for another year or so. So how can we kind of stop being in this temporary mode, because it's lasting too long, and try to get back to some programming, or the full programming.
That's a good question to ask. Let me ask you this question. Given that situation, if you were going to take a look at the situation of leadership, what hat do you need to wear in that particular context to face that challenge? What hat do you need to wear?
Is it human resources or organizational?
Resources, organizational. What hat does she need to wear? Class members, helper. Anybody want to help Joy? Everybody's afraid to help Joy? All right. I'll tell you this, all right? Let me share this with you. I understand exactly what you're talking about. When the church is closed and your normal patterns are disrupted, it's hard to hold the family together. Ordinarily, it sounded to me, because you identified earlier that your church basically operates on the human resource model, right? Basically. However, you have a different situation right now. You do have a critical situation, but order and structure may not help you because you didn't have it ahead of time. So trying to oppose an order and structure now wouldn't necessarily help. Probably the best frame for you to operate out of would be the symbolic frame. In the symbolic frame, you are able to inspire people with a larger vision and mission for what the church is, and how we hold together no matter what. The devil tried to take us apart, but he couldn't separate us. Who could separate us from the love of Christ? Can tribulation, distress, famine, or nakedness, or sword? I would operate out of that symbolic frame, holding up before them the larger vision of the church, the larger mission of the church, and helping people to understand that together we can get through this. In the symbolic frame, you also can draw upon metaphors. A friend of mine was a college president, and he took over a grade, not he's not an advocate, it's a secondary school, public school, and he took over this particular college. And when he did, the college was failing. Enrollment was down, money was funny, faculty were leaving. And so he knew he had to operate in a frame. He chose the symbolic frame, and he used for a metaphor the symbol of a train. He said, when the train is on track and the train has the fuel that it needs, it's speeding down toward its final destination. He said, we got to be that train. We start slowly at first, but as we, over time, we gather momentum, we move down the track, heading toward our goal. He used the symbol of the train in his literature and all of his speeches. It became a metaphor for the organization. And the metaphor for the organization ultimately helped to turn the organization around during a difficult and challenging time. He inspired them into action and inspired them to hold together when everything was falling apart. So I would perhaps share that. Anybody else want to chime in?
I think we're having the same problem, Dr. Blue. I feel that, I mean, even though sometimes we have our church doesn't have regular meetings like some other churches, like on a Saturday or Wednesday night. They do it once in a while. So and I see the separation. I don't see the things were the way they used to be when we were all going to church every day. So I can relate to what Joy is saying.
So you don't have any regular prayer meeting or none?
I hate to comment. I don't want to put my leader under the bridge, but
well, let me just say this, right? The conversation that we having in the class, we talked about this for the purpose of dissecting it.
Yeah, it's just he's even though we have brought it to the board, and they have approved it, he doesn't follow through with it, and and I've even spoken with the elders and the first elder, and we just acquire a brand new church. We have like 3 acres. This is a huge property, and I believe God put that church in that place for a purpose. And one of the things that I admire what you're doing, and I have a plan also of maybe someday I'm going to call you and spend some time on the phone with you, because my way of thinking is in line with what you're doing, serving the community. I believe with all my heart that's what we need to be at, And so I brought up the idea about, there's other churches. Our conference doesn't want us to get together yet because of the pandemic. But if you want to serve the community, if you want to do live services, you can do it. Social distancing, only a limited amount of people there to do videography, audio, whatever. But there's churches in our conference right now that every Saturday they get together and they put tents, or they do drive-in, like parking lots, the cars in the parking lots, and they'll have some kind of a system where they actually, the people can be in their cars with AC on and they can listen to the sermon in the parking lot in the radio. So there's a lot of things that we can do, but they just don't follow through with it. So I feel that the church is dying. And it's just because the leaders, and we can have a lot of good ideas, but I'm not in a place to do something when they say no, don't do it, because then I feel like I'm being disrespectful, or maybe they look at me like I'm being defiant. So I'm just like, I just pray. That's all I can do. I say, God, what we're wasting time.
You were here earlier. At the beginning of the class. What's the difference between the weatherman and the rain cloud?
I kind of listened to what you were saying, but
let me back and reiterate it. Right? The weatherman reports the weather. The rain cloud makes the weather. Right. But what I'm saying to you in this situation. You take a look at the organizational leadership models, right? If you are a leader, you are a leader, you are a leader. If you're a rain cloud, you're a rain cloud, you're a rain cloud, you're a rain cloud. You don't have to stop being a rain cloud because somebody else is not being a rain cloud. Right? In the situation which you're in, if God has given you the ability to lead, and now's the time to look at assess your situation, see where you are, see what your church is, evaluate it, and put that hat on that fits the context and begin to move. Now, you say that there's a lack of structure. The same thing you do. There's just a lack of structure in order to get things done. Right? So you said earlier, Joy, that you need a political frame. And maybe, just maybe, you need to say, well, listen, if there is no structure to get this done, here is a structure that we can use. You can propose a structure in order to get it done. In your situation now, you said that the board has proposed a structure, and the pastor won't follow through. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I have a prayer meeting every Saturday night. I get off this phone, get off right now. I'm going to my church prayer meeting. Every night at 8 o'clock. Every night at 8 o'clock. Like 7 days a week, ever since the pandemic began. Right? So every night I'm on this prayer line. Sometimes it drives me crazy. I'm on the prayer line. But guess what? I didn't start the prayer line. It wasn't my idea to start a prayer line. It was a personal ministries leader to start the prayer line. Now, every night we got about 300 people on the prayer line every night.
Wow.
They call in from Jamaica, they call in from different parts of the globe, different parts of the country. People on the prayer line, and I didn't start it. But I'm saying to you, I'm saying to both of you is this: in the absence of leadership that will provide the kind of direction that is necessary in order to keep your church together, then you may have to be that leader. And you can do it in a non-threatening way. You can start a prayer line just by getting a few of your friends together and say, listen, let's pray together every night. Right? Let's invite other people to join us for prayer. And then as you begin to pray with others, then you take it back. Hey, listen, we have this prayer line that's going on. Can we advertise this in the church? Pastor, why don't you come on and speak for us? On every Tuesday. Because we have so many people on the prayer line, it would be a shame to miss this evangelistic moment. So there are ways that you can back into. You can be the leader without having the chair.
It's very hard.
Yes. But that's why God called you.
Yeah. You know, you were talking about the nonprofit. We actually, there's 404 of us that we have this dream, and I don't want to take the time. Someday I'm going to call you and tell you about it. We incorporated. We have a nonprofit. We're in the process of filing for tax exempt, and we talked to 3 different food banks. On Wednesdays, we can go with 3 pickup trucks, and they will put 2 pallets of food on each pickup truck. And I mean, we're putting everything in a platter for them, and they will not do it.
Well,
and I'm going crazy, you know. I'm like, I want to do something. I don't, and I can't just go in there and open the church, and I don't understand. We're supposed to be doing this for the people, for the community, and some people just don't have the vision, And for me to see that in the Adventist church, I'm like, oh my God,
Are you saying the church is denying you the privilege of doing this?
Yeah, because we just got this church, right? It's pretty big, and we have the fellowship hall. Well, they rather fellowship than serve the community, and I'm like, I there's a saying that you don't have hair in your lips. Like, I always say what I mind. Sometimes it gets me in trouble, But I tell them, why do we have to entertain ourselves? This fellowship hall, we can expand this church when we have more money because we have the land. This is big enough to put refrigerators, and we can get the food in here, but they won't listen to me. So they want to have a fellowship hall instead of having a mini food bank and serve the community every week, like you're doing. When you said what you were doing that the church didn't want it, and then you do it, now you're serving so many people. I'm like, I got sad because this is what I want to do over here, and we have everything lined up. We have the people to give us the food, but they don't have a vision. They just want to it's a group of people that dominate the church, and they just want to be happy with themselves, and that's it.
Okay, Uber Francine, how would you help him? What advice would you give to him?
It was kind of loud in the background. I didn't hear any of the full question.
Okay. All right.
Tell him to go ahead and move forward. Even though, and especially in the case where you said the board had already voted to do it, I would just go ahead and take the initiative. I'd volunteer. Just something we didn't want to, anybody specifically agree to do it. I'll volunteer and go ahead and do it. And if other people decide that you are going to do the food giveaway, then you get your nonprofit, but under the name of your nonprofit. You don't necessarily have to be attached to the church. If you had like church teacher or something like that, you got to put church in, but it's not under the auspices of the church as such.
Yeah.
That's me.
It's funny because I was even thinking, I'm just going to go to the church board and just pay them rent and let them rent me the room, and I'll do it myself with my wife. I don't know.
You said your friends have come together to form this nonprofit. So like Francina said, if you can turn it more into like a straight facility request and not so much that you need anything else from the church, that might be a way to get in. And then when it takes off and is successful, then maybe the church will want to claim it more and support more. But if you're making it so they don't have to do anything but say yes, you can use the fellowship hall, and I guess your church isn't meeting, they're not having any social events in here anyway, so they should let's use it as a day to need it right now. Maybe.
Yeah, I could bring that up.
Could you even use the parking lot?
Well, we need. Here's the thing: the people that are going to give us the food, they're going to come and inspect the place. They just don't give it to us. They have to approve it. So it has to be sanitized. We have to have refrigerators because they give us frozen food, milk. I mean, everything, eggs, are like groceries, and so it has to be a place adequate to store food.
Let me tell you this. Right now, at our location, we don't have refrigeration units. We don't. We have some on order, but we start our program without refrigeration units.
Okay.
And the way that we were able to do that is we said, look, give us as many non-perishable stuff as you can give us. We can move that. And we also work on an agreement with them that for certain produce, we wouldn't take all produce, but they helped us to determine what produce could sit for 24 hours without needing refrigeration. So, for example, we can do cabbage, we can do broccoli, we can do things like cucumbers and certain things that they can give us that don't oxidate the other fruit and cause another vegetable and cause it to rot. So even without refrigeration, we're still doing it. And as a result of us doing that, that's what happened, right? We actually got donations in of $18,000. Somebody gave us $10,000. We got other contributions equivalent to $18,000. And within about 6 weeks, we're going to have massive refrigerator, freezer units coming in, installed in the building. So if you're able to start, even if you're able to start small, and say to the church, listen, give me a Tuesday afternoon or whatever it is. We'll be in, we'll be out, everything will be clean, and by the time you get to your Sabbath, everything will be fine. Just start with what you can start with. Work with the people you negotiate with. Also, too, it will help you if you are pulling down the demographics of your neighborhood and showing them the need. If you have done your research, if you are able to show them the plan that says, here is my team. We have location, we have drivers, we have this, we have that. You're able to put that down in a document about 2 or 3 pages. Then they're much more willing to work with you. These agencies don't want to give food to people who don't have the organizational structure. They don't want people selling food, or taking all the food home for themselves. So put together the structure, and more than likely you'll be able to get it off the plane, get it working.
Okay. Okay.
Now, Joy, I want to go back to you just for a moment. Okay?
I'm in class.
Because your situation is slightly different. Right now, you seem to indicate that nothing is really going on, right?
Yeah, nothing other than divine worship.
Yeah.
What would you like to see happen?
I'll call you back in the
Well, I'd like at minimum start the children Sabbath school back, because right now when they do come, they're just in the adult Sabbath school class, and I teach the adult Sabbath school class, or else I would, do the children. So I don't know. The pastor's wife does like the early teen and the people that we're doing the little children. They also haven't come back, so that it's probably also one of the issues. So I don't know. I'm wondering like how I could get someone, maybe if she had somebody to say I'm ready to start with Sabbath school, she would, we could restart the kids. I don't really know what to do about Pathfinders, but I figured at least if we could focus on the children Sabbath first.
Is your COVID infection rate low enough for you to have kids back?
Well, the school the rate is low compared to everywhere else. But like the schools aren't meeting. but I'm not sure what their issue is. But I mean, we're meeting in church, so I'm like, if we can all meet for adult Sabbath school and divine worship, there's no reason that we can't meet for kids Sabbath school, please. That doesn't make sense. And the conference has given churches the go-ahead to open if they have their plan in place, and only in the smaller places like ours are churches reopening. So I don't think it would be an issue. We have masks and stuff.
So, what would you tell Joy, good people?
Would it be a possibility to have, if one of the issues having the kids come out to church, would it be a possibility to have a virtual Sabbath school for the kids? My concern currently for the kids, since the pandemic started, we have ours virtually, and a lot of kids show up for the virtual Sabbath school. We're not open to church, but so right now it's virtual, but the virtual Sabbath school is basically packed with a lot of kids. So would that be an option you can explore? And it doesn't have to be in the morning like my church Sabbath school right now for the kids in the afternoon. It's 1:30 on Sabbath, and so many kids attend.
We don't really have good internet access or computer access, especially with the families with kids. But that's an idea I could ask the pastor's wife. Like I don't know. Maybe if parents would bring their kids, we could do it in the afternoon. Maybe have Sabbath school in the afternoon, because then I can help her, and that may go a long way to getting it back started if she knows someone else is going to do at least half the work. So I hadn't thought about trying to do it after church. So that may be something.
One thing about Alaska, you'll have some long, dark winters. You have plenty of time on your hands. You have plenty of time on your hands. Yeah, that's actually that may be a solution. One thing is that you have to know how, as a leader, you have to know how passionately you feel about it too. If you feel passionately about it enough to do taking on an afternoon project, then do it. If you feel that passionately about it, then just go do it anyway. I was at church. My church didn't have Sabbath school for the kids. When I got there, they had adult Sabbath school. They had no Sabbath school for the kids. So I said, where's it? We don't have a children's Sabbath school teacher. They were so happy to have me teaching them. You know what I did? I quit teaching them. And I went back and I was teaching the what do you call it? The primary and kindergarten kids. I taught them. He said, well, Pastor, why are you back there with the kids? I said, because these kids are more important than you are. You already understand this stuff. But we can't afford to allow these kids to go without this instruction. So I just walked out on them and went back and I did that for about 6 months until somebody stepped to the plate and said, okay, we're going to have Sabbath school for the kids. But I was prepared to do that because it was that important to me. So sometimes you got to make that calculus, make that decision to say if it's that important, put my weight behind it. And when you do it, people follow. They follow. If you did that thing in the afternoon, like you were talking about, thinking about doing, Pastor's wife would be there. She'd follow. Right?
Okay. Yeah. Before COVID, right as COVID, February and March of this year, we did a revival, and it was with the conference. So we streamed whatever they were doing in Anchorage, and we did a coordinated kids program, and we had between 10 and 15 kids coming 5 days a week, 5 evenings a week. So it was a lot of activity, and then we've gone to pretty much zero. So I'll look into the afternoon thing.
Thanks for that, Uber. We should appreciate that. All right. Anybody else have a little pressing challenge in the next 10 minutes or so? So you know what I'm going to do next week? I'm going to bring you some challenges. Throw some stuff on you, make your brain work a little bit harder. So you will sit there and listen to me talk for 2 hours. I want to hear you talk. I want to hear the melodious voices. I want to hear the wisdom that's pouring forth from you. I want you to be those rain clouds that just can't hold rain any longer. You just got to let it all out. But in the meantime, be strong in the Lord and the power of His might. Amen. I just conclude by saying this. In your organization, look for that structure. Look for the tools of empowerment, because in that human resources zone, that's when you look at the tools of empowerment, the resources that you have to empower people. In that political zone, that's where you look for your coalitions. So for example, if you want to get something done, Daniel, you need coalitions. That's a political issue, right? The coalition may mean that I have to go beyond the church board to do this, or I may have to coalesce with some people on the church board to get the board to take a vote to move in this direction. So this is that area of negotiation, back and forth, deal making, back and forth. So you're going to have to operate somewhat in that political zone, in that political frame to get some things done, right? That rumble in the jungle stuff, right? Yes. You're going to have to operate in that symbolic frame, and Daniel too. In this symbolic frame, one of the things that you want to do, Daniel, is not just say we want to feed people, right? But get a narrative that goes along with it. A story, something that inspires and touches hearts. Watching CNN, and this one reporter has been doing these reports on hunger in America since the pandemic. Right? By the time she gets to the end of her reports, I'm not crying because this is stuff I see every day. Where the reporters are sitting there on CNN, they all have tears in their eyes because now it's being driven home to them. And so, in many ways, this report is operating in this symbolic frame to give them these images and to create this sense of what is going on in order to jostle the political frame in order to get action. Right.
So
Look at the coalitions, and then
try to
get a good narrative to try to move them in a different direction. Right. Well, it's been a pleasure, pleasing pleasure, joy to be with you, to see your smiling faces. And you know the Uber's driving, but I saw your smiling face on Sabbath. You surprised me when you showed up at my church. And we had baptism that day, so I almost baptized him. But I almost told him if he wanted to pass my class, he had to get it approved because I tried to get my numbers up. But then I let him know he brought his wife and his children. I said, oh man, that's 5 souls for the kingdom right there. But that's my chance. But it's good to see you all, and let's conclude with prayer. And Jonathan, I know you're out there. Saw you earlier.
Hello. Dr. Blue.
Good to see you, my friend.
I'm praying?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Father, for this class. Thank you for this moment. Bless you, every people in the moment. So, ayúdanos a poder continuar estudiando, danos tu bendición a crecer juntos, que tu Espíritu Santo nos pueda guiar y nos pueda preparar para cuando terminemos esta clase, estemos preparados para ir a trabajar en tu nombre. Bendícenos a cada uno de nosotros, danos tu protección a esta hora. In the name of Jesus, pray. Amen.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sorry for my English. I need to study English, finally, my student, and since my English is good,
Yes, I understand.
So me understand. So the problem is
Yes. I understand. Same with me with Spanish. I understand about half of what you
Okay, thank you.
But my speaking is terrible.
Okay.
Sometimes people are talking around. They can know what they're saying. I know what they're saying.
Oh yeah.
God bless you all. See y'all next week.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.